The Brazilian musician Hermeto Pascoal, whose boundless creativity transformed the way the world thought about music, has died at the age of 89, known for his ability to conjure melody and rhythm out of virtually anything from kettles to children's toys. From his own breath to the squeals of a piglet, Pascoal was a true original, a man for whom music was not just an art form but a way of life. His death, announced on his official social media channels, noted that he passed away surrounded by family and fellow musicians, which felt perfectly fitting for a man whose entire existence was spent in the company of sound. To understand the significance of Hermeto Pascoal, one must understand the world into which he was born and the life he lived. He came into the world on June 22, 1936, in Lagoa da Canoa, a small rural town in Alagoas State, in Brazil's impoverished northeast. His early years were shaped by poverty, but also by an environment steeped in natural sound. Pascoal was an albino child, which meant that he was spared from working in the harsh tropical sun alongside other children in the fields, a fact that might have seemed like misfortune at the time, but one that ultimately gave him the time and freedom to discover what would become his life's purpose. While other children toiled under the sun, Hermeto would spend hours alone with his father's accordion, exploring the sounds it could make, listening carefully to the calls of birds and the rustle of the wind, training his ear to hear music where most people would have heard only noise. This early exposure to sound as a living, breathing presence was critical to the development of Pascoal's musical philosophy. He often said that nature was his first and most enduring teacher. The way he listened was different from most people. To him, the chatter of birds, the sound of rain hitting tin roofs, the distant barking of dogs, all of it was music. By the time he was a teenager, Pascoal had developed into a gifted accordion player, and when his family moved to Recife, a bustling port city, he found himself exposed to a wider range of musical influences. Recife was a city alive with sound, street performers, carnival bands, sailors from faraway places bringing records and instruments with them. It was here that Pascoal began to develop his reputation as a musician with extraordinary ability, able to sit in with any group and play anything put in front of him. He was largely self-taught, which meant that his understanding of music was intuitive rather than academic. He could play by ear, improvise with ease, and move fluidly between instruments, something that would become a hallmark of his career. His talent eventually took him to Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, Brazil's largest cities and the centers of its thriving music scene. By the 1960s, Pascoal was recording with some of Brazil's most celebrated performers, including Elis Regina, widely considered one of the greatest Brazilian singers of all time. These collaborations helped bring him to the attention of international audiences. Percussionist Hermeto Moreira, a fellow Brazilian who had moved to the United States, invited Pascoal to join him on tour. And it was during this period that Pascoal met one of his most famous admirers, the legendary Miles Davis. The story of Pascoal's first encounter with Davis has become the stuff of jazz folklore. Before they even played together, Davis invited Pascoal into his personal boxing ring. The Brazilian, who had never been afraid of confrontation, threw a punch that reportedly landed squarely on Davis's face. Far from being offended, Davis was impressed. He nicknamed Pascoal the Mad Albino and went on to describe him as the most impressive musician in the world. Davis invited him to play on his seminal 1970 album Livival, and 3 of Pascoal's compositions ended up on the record. For many jazz fans outside Brazil, this was their first introduction to Pascoal's unique genius. What set Hermeto Pascoal apart was not just his technical brilliance but the way he approached music as something limitless. On his 1977 album, Slave's Mass, he famously used a piglet as a musical instrument, squeezing it gently so that it squealed in rhythm with the track. The album's back cover even featured a photo of Pascoal cradling the animal in his arms, as though to remind listeners that music could come from anywhere, from anyone, and from anything. He used kettles filled with water, children's toys, flutes fashioned from everyday objects, cow horns, anything that could make a sound. He believed that the entire world was an orchestra, and he was its conductor. But while he was celebrated internationally as a jazz musician, Pascoal himself resisted the label. Jazz, he said, was too small a box for what he was doing. His music owed just as much to Brazilian genres like corinho, a fast and playful form of instrumental music, and samba, the heartbeat of Brazilian popular music. He blended folk traditions, avant-garde experimentation, and improvisation into something that felt entirely his own. When people hear my music, they find it very hard to pinpoint and to pigeonhole it, he told Jazzwise magazine in 2022. When they think I am doing one thing, I am already doing something else. It's very liquid. Even in his later years, Pascoal remained a force of nature on stage. Well into his 80s, he was still writing, recording, and leading ensembles of younger musicians, pushing them to go further, to take more risks, to explore sound the way he had learned to do as a boy listening to the Byrds and at a show in London in 2022. He encouraged a group of young performers to experiment fearlessly before launching into one of his own famously intense solos, proving that age had not dulled his energy or curiosity. His passing marks the end of an era for Brazilian music and for the global music community at large. For many, Pascoal represented the idea that music should have no limits, that it should be playful, strange, challenging, and above all alive. His white hair and thick beard made him an instantly recognizable figure. A sort of wizard-like presence who seemed to channel sound from another dimension. Those who saw him perform live often spoke of the experience as something spiritual, a reminder of the power of creativity to break boundaries and connect people. Tributes have poured in from musicians around the world, each one speaking to the profound influence Pascoal had on their own work. For many, he was not just a musician but a mentor and an inspiration, a living example of what it means to be fully dedicated to one's craft. His death has left a void, but his recordings, more than 2,000 compositions in total, ensure that his voice will continue to resonate for generations to come. In a time when much of popular music is driven by formula and commercial calculation, Pascoal remained defiantly original to the very end. He never allowed himself to be boxed in, never compromised on his vision. In this sense, he leaves behind not just a body of work, but a challenge to all who follow, to listen more closely, to be more daring, to see music not as a product but as a living, breathing force that surrounds us all the time. Pascoal's career was not simply about recording albums or performing concerts. It was about reshaping the way people understood music itself. For him, music was not just organized sound. It was a spiritual practice, a way to connect the physical and metaphysical worlds. Those who knew him personally often described him as having an almost mystical relationship with sound. He would wake up in the middle of the night to write down ideas that had come to him in dreams. He would walk through forests and stop suddenly because he heard something, perhaps the sound of wind rustling through the leaves or the distant cry of a bird that sparked an entire composition. In his mind, even in his home, music was everywhere. Friends and fellow musicians recall that there was rarely a moment of silence when Pascoal was around. He might suddenly pick up a pot, a pan, or a bottle and start creating rhythms on the kitchen table. He might whistle a melody, record it on a small tape machine, and later build an entire arrangement around that fragment. His family had grown accustomed to living inside this constant flow of creativity. They would hear new compositions come together almost in real time, witnessing the way Pascoal transformed the sounds of everyday life into something transcendent.